Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
You've known things you couldn't explain. You've stood at a crossroads. Maybe it was a job offer, a relationship, a decision that looked perfectly reasonable on paper, and something in you pulled back. Not loudly, not with evidence. Just a quiet no. A tightening somewhere beneath your ribs. A whisper so soft you almost missed it. And maybe you listened. And it saved you. Or maybe you didn't listen. And you've carried that ever since. That's what we're really talking about today. Not some mystical, out-of-reach concept. Not something reserved for spiritual teachers or gifted healers. We're talking about you, your body, your history, your knowing. That voice that arrived before logic could catch up. That thing inside you that has always been trying to protect you, guide you, tell you the truth. Your intuition. Here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. Most of us were taught, very early and very thoroughly, to distrust ourselves. We were taught that feelings aren't facts, that sensible decisions come from lists and plans and second opinions, that a woman who just has a feeling is being emotional, irrational, impractical. We absorbed that message so deeply that we stopped hearing our own quiet whispers. We started outsourcing our inner knowing to spreadsheets, to other people's opinions, to the relentless noise of a world that doesn't pause long enough for us to feel anything at all. And then we wonder why we feel so lost. I've been thinking about the women I know, the ones I've walked beside through the terrain of midlife and beyond. And one thing I keep coming back to is this. So many of us arrive at our 50s, 60s, 70s carrying the weight of the choices we made against ourselves. The marriage we stayed in too long because everyone said it looked fine from the outside. The friendship that drained us dry, but we couldn't name why. The opportunity we talked ourselves out of because we were afraid people would think we were foolish. And underneath all of it, this painful, private truth I knew. I always knew. That knowing didn't leave you. It's still here. I want you to think of your intuition not as some rare, mystical gift that either you have or you don't. I want you to think of it the way you'd think of a muscle that hasn't been used in a while. Still there, a little quiet, a little stiff, but absolutely alive and absolutely yours and absolutely capable of becoming one of the most powerful tools you carry into the second half of your life. Because here's something that the research actually backs up, and something I think your lived experience already confirms. Women who've lived long, full, complex lives, women who have survived things, have built up something remarkable inside themselves. Every hard moment you navigated, every time you read a room correctly or sensed danger before it arrived, every time you looked into someone's eyes and understood something they never said out loud, you were training that knowing. You were adding to something. Your intuition isn't separate from your experience. It is your experience. All of it distilled. The unspoken truths you've witnessed, the grief you've processed, the joy you've learned to recognize, the lies you've seen through, the love that cracked you open. All of that lives in your body, in your nervous system, in the quiet intelligence that operates just beneath the surface of your conscious thoughts. The problem isn't that you don't have intuition. The problem is that the world has been very loud, and for a long time, you let that loudness drown out what you already know. But something happens to a lot of women as they move through their 50s and 60s. The noise starts to matter less. The approval of others loses some of its grip. There's a kind of clarity that begins to emerge, not because life gets easier, but because you finally have enough distance from who you used to be to see yourself a little more honestly. You've watched enough things unfold to trust your own read of a situation. You've been wrong enough times and right enough times to understand that the most dangerous thing isn't acting on your intuition. It's ignoring it. That quiet, persistent, sometimes inconvenient inner voice. It's been faithful to you even when you weren't faithful to it. And what I want to explore with you is this: what happens when you start listening, really listening, not just acknowledging the whisper and then explaining it away, but actually treating it as information, as data, as the voice of someone who loves you and wants you to be okay. What changes when you stop requiring your inner knowing to justify itself in language your logical mind will accept? What becomes possible in your relationships, your choices, your daily life when you stop demanding that your gut explain itself before you're willing to trust it? Because here's what I've come to believe. Intuition isn't the opposite of wisdom. It is wisdom. It's just wisdom that arrived before you had the words for it. And you've been collecting it your whole life. Let's talk about what's actually happening when that feeling arrives. Because I know some of you have spent years dismissing it, calling it anxiety, calling it overthinking, calling it nothing, just nerves, just fear, just you being dramatic again. And I want to dismantle that story today, gently but completely, because it isn't true. And the science, it turns out, is on your side in a way that might just take your breath away. There's a field of research that emerged in the 1990s, pioneered by a neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio. And what he discovered fundamentally changed how we understand the relationship between the body and the mind. He called it the somatic marker hypothesis. It's a long name for a simple, profound idea your body keeps score of every experience you've ever had, every outcome, every consequence, every moment where something went wrong or beautifully right. Your nervous system filed it away. And when a similar situation arises again, your body responds before your conscious mind has even finished processing the question. That tightening in your chest, that's not weakness. That's your nervous system running a search through decades of lived experience and sending you the results. That sudden ease you feel around a certain person, even though you've only just met them, that's not naivety. That's pattern recognition so sophisticated that no algorithm has ever come close to replicating it. Your body is, in the most literal and biological sense, a library, and your intuition is how it speaks to you. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. Research on what scientists call the enteric nervous system, the vast web of neurons lining your gut, has shown that this system contains somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 million nerve cells. It communicates constantly with your brain, but not always in the direction we assume. The gut sends more signals up to the brain than the brain sends down to the gut, which means that feeling in your stomach, it genuinely is information flowing upward. Your gut isn't reacting to what your brain decided. Often, it's informing what your brain is about to decide. You are not making this up. You never were. And then there's this, researchers studying decision-making have found something quietly astonishing in complex situations. The kind with too many variables, too much uncertainty, too many factors for the rational mind to neatly organize. People who trusted their intuitive responses often made better decisions than people who deliberated carefully and at length. Not in simple math problems, not in situations with clear, calculable answers, but in the messy, human high-stakes situations that actually make up most of our real lives. The gut often outperforms the spreadsheet. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm not telling you to be reckless. I'm not saying throw out every practical consideration and just feel your way through every choice. What I'm saying is something more nuanced than that. Something I think you, at this stage of your life, are ready to hear. Your intuition is most powerful and most trustworthy when it's been seasoned by experience. And you have that experience. Think about it this way. A young person might have strong feelings about a situation, but those feelings are running on limited data. They haven't yet seen how certain kinds of relationships unfold over decades. They haven't watched enough people reveal their true character under pressure. They haven't yet learned the particular way that certain kinds of charm can be a warning sign, or the way a certain kind of quiet confidence in a person is something you can feel before you can explain it. But you have seen those things. You've lived them. You've sat across from people and felt something shift in the air before a single word was spoken. You've walked into rooms and known, within moments, whether you were welcome or merely tolerated. You've loved people, lost people, rebuilt yourself after things you thought would break you for good. All of that is stored. All of that is working for you right now, whether you consciously access it or not. The question isn't whether you have this wisdom. The question is whether you've been giving yourself permission to use it. And I think for so many women of our generation, women who were raised to be accommodating, to be reasonable, to be nice, the answer has often been no. We learned very young that saying, "I just have a feeling," wasn't considered a legitimate reason for anything. We needed to justify, we needed to explain, we needed to make our inner experience legible to everyone around us before we were allowed to act on it. So we stopped listening. Or we listened and then spent hours talking ourselves out of it. I want to tell you about something that came up in a conversation I had with a woman. I'll call her Carol, a retired teacher in her late 60s. She described a situation where she was about to co-sign on a business venture with an old friend. Everything about it looked reasonable. The friend was trustworthy. The numbers made sense. The opportunity was real. But the night before she was supposed to sign, she couldn't sleep. She kept waking up with this low-level dread she couldn't place. She told herself it was just anxiety. She told herself she was being overly cautious. She almost signed anyway, because she couldn't explain in any language that felt rational why she shouldn't. She didn't sign. Couldn't bring herself to do it. 6 months later, her friend, through absolutely no malicious intent, just an unexpected cascade of circumstances, lost nearly everything she'd put into that venture. Carol told me, I knew. I don't know how I knew, but my body knew before my brain did. And for the first time in my life, I actually listened to it. That's not magic. That's not luck. That is a woman with 68 years of lived experience, whose nervous system recognized a pattern that her conscious mind hadn't fully assembled yet. That's the library doing its job. That's the body sending its signals upward, and a woman finally being still enough to receive them. And here's what struck me most about what Carol said. It wasn't just that she avoided a financial loss. It was the way she described how it felt to have listened to herself. She said it was like coming home. Like something that had been slightly out of alignment for decades had quietly clicked back into place. That's what happens when you stop overriding yourself. There's this sanctuary. It's the only word for it. That becomes available to you. A place inside your own life where your knowing is honored, where your experience counts, where you don't have to justify the quiet whispers before you're allowed to heed them. And the more you listen, the clearer that voice becomes. Not louder necessarily. It rarely gets loud, that's not its nature. But clearer, more distinct, easier to distinguish from fear, from ego, from the old anxious habits of mind that sometimes masquerade as intuition, but feel completely different once you learn to tell them apart. Because there is a difference, and it's one of the most important things to understand. Fear contracts, it clenches. It says protect yourself, stay small, don't move. Intuition, even when it's pointing towards something hard, even when it's delivering news you weren't hoping for, it has a quality of steadiness to it, a kind of quiet authority. It doesn't scream, it doesn't spiral, it simply knows. And it keeps knowing calmly and persistently until you're ready to listen. You have access to that right now, today. The only question is whether you're ready to stop treating yourself like a witness who needs to be cross-examined before her testimony counts. So if this knowing has always been inside us, if the science confirms it and our own lives prove it, why is it so hard to trust? That's the question I want to sit with you in for a while. Because I don't think the answer is simple, and I don't think you deserve a simple answer. You've lived too much for that. And I think part of the healing that's available to us in this season of life, this extraordinary, underrated, quietly powerful season, is being honest about what was taken from us and what we can choose to take back. Let's start here. Most of us grew up in households, schools, and cultures that had a very clear message about whose inner experience was valid and whose wasn't. We were taught to defer, to check with someone else before trusting ourselves, to second-guess the very instincts that nature spent millennia building into us. And this wasn't always malicious. Sometimes it came from people who loved us, parents who were trying to protect us from disappointment, teachers who were trying to prepare us for a world that wouldn't be gentle with women who spoke from their gut instead of their RA, partners who, perhaps without even realizing it, subtly trained us to doubt ourselves by questioning our perceptions one small moment at a time. There's actually a name for that last one. We call it gaslighting now, though many of us lived through it for years before we had that word. And the insidious thing about it, whether it happened in a marriage, a friendship, a workplace, even a well-meaning family, is that it doesn't just change what you believe about a specific situation. It changes what you believe about yourself as a knower. It convinces you, slowly and thoroughly, that your perceptions can't be trusted, that your feelings are disproportionate, that the thing you clearly saw, clearly felt, clearly knew, you must have gotten it wrong. And when that happens long enough, you stop consulting yourself altogether. You outsource your inner life. You pull other people before making decisions. You talk yourself into and out of things based on what seems reasonable to everyone else, because somewhere along the way you absorb the belief that your own read of a situation simply isn't reliable. Does any of this feel familiar? I'm asking gently, because I know it might land somewhere tender. And I want you to know that if it does, if you're reading this and recognizing something you've quietly carried for years, that recognition itself is a form of your intuition waking back up. The part of you that knows it was taught not to know. The part of you that remembers, even faintly, what it felt like before you learned to doubt yourself so thoroughly. That part of you is still here. She never left. And now I want to talk about something that I think is one of the most underappreciated gifts of growing older. Something our culture, with its relentless worship of youth, almost never acknowledges. There comes a point in a woman's life, and it's different for everyone, but for many of us it arrives somewhere in the 50s and accelerates through the 60s and beyond, where the weight of other people's opinions begins to lift, not all at once, not without effort. But there's a loosening that happens, a quiet rebellion that doesn't announce itself with a manifesto or a confrontation, but simply arrives one morning as a kind of tired clarity, a recognition that you have spent an enormous amount of your life managing other people's comfort, and that you are done explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand you anyway. That is not bitterness. Please don't hear it as bitterness. That is liberation. That is your intuition reclaiming its authority. And what I want to offer you today are not techniques, exactly, not a 5-step plan for accessing your inner wisdom, because I think that kind of packaging insults both the depth of this topic and your intelligence. What I want to offer instead are invitations. Small, gentle, deeply personal invitations to begin the unlearning. The first is this: start noticing the sensations, not just the conclusions. Most of us, when we talk about intuition, talk about it in hindsight. I should have known. I had a bad feeling. But the practice of actually building your relationship with your intuition lives in the present tense. It lives in the body right now, in real time. The next time you're in a conversation and something subtly shifts, a slight heaviness, a faint discomfort, a quiet brightening somewhere in your chest, don't immediately explain it away. Don't immediately reach for a rational cause. Just notice it. Let it be there. Give it 30 seconds of your attention before you decide what it means or doesn't mean. You're not committing to act on it. You're just acknowledging that something in you registered something. That's enough to start. The second invitation is this: learn to distinguish the voice of intuition from the voice of fear. Because they can sound similar, can't they? Both can make you hesitate. Both can make you pull back from something. But if you get still enough and honest enough with yourself, they feel entirely different in the body. Fear has a franticness to it, a spiraling quality. It asks catastrophic questions. What if this goes wrong? What will people think? What if I can't handle it? It loops. It escalates. It pulls you out of the present moment and drags you into every worst case future simultaneously. Intuition is still. It doesn't catastrophize. It doesn't repeat itself endlessly or gather more and more evidence for why you should be afraid. It simply presents itself, steady, quiet, unhurried, and then waits. It says something once clearly, and if you don't listen, it says it again in exactly the same tone. No drama, no urgency. Just that calm, unwavering knowing that something is true, or something is off, or this path is yours, or this one isn't. Once you learn to tell the difference, you can't unlearn it, and it changes everything. The third invitation, and perhaps the most important one for women of our generation specifically, is this: give yourself permission to know things without being able to explain them. This one goes against so much of how we were raised. We were trained to justify, to have reasons, to be able to lay it all out logically so that no one could accuse us of being merely emotional. And that training has cost us dearly. It has kept us in rooms we should have left. It has kept us silent when we should have spoken. It has kept us loyal to versions of our lives that no longer fit us, long after our inner knowing had already moved on. You don't owe anyone an explanation for what you know. Not your children, not your partner, not your friends. Not the voice inside your own head that still sounds a little too much like every person who ever told you to be more reasonable. You are allowed to say, I don't know exactly why, but I know. You are allowed to make decisions from that place. You are allowed to trust the knowing that arrives before the words do. Because here's the thing about this time in your life, this particular, irreplaceable, hard-won season. You have less time for being wrong about what matters, not in a frightening way, in a clarifying way. The things that once felt worth compromising for, approval, belonging, the comfort of fitting in, they start to carry less weight. And the things that are genuinely yours, your values, your voice, your inner compass that has been pointing toward truth your whole life, even when you ignored it, those start to feel more precious, more urgent, more worth protecting. Your intuition is not a luxury for this season of your life. It is the most sophisticated navigation system you have ever had access to. It has been calibrated by every experience you've survived, every relationship you've moved through, every loss and every joy and every quiet morning when you sat with yourself and knew something that you didn't yet know how to say. And it is entirely, completely, irrevocably yours. The unlearning isn't fast. I won't lie to you about that. Some of those old voices, the ones that told you your knowing wasn't trustworthy, they've been tenants in your head for a long time. They don't just pack up and leave because you've decided to reclaim the sanctuary. But they do get quieter. With practice, with patience, with a particular kind of compassion that takes years to fully develop. They do get quieter. And in the silence they leave behind. That's where you've been waiting for yourself all along. I want to start this final part with something that might surprise you. Trusting your intuition is not, at its heart, about making better decisions. Though it will do that, it's not primarily about avoiding the wrong people or choosing the right path or finally feeling confident in your choices. Though it will do those things too. At its deepest level, trusting your intuition is an act of self-love. Maybe the most radical one available to you. Because what you're really saying, when you choose to honor that quiet inner knowing, is this: I matter enough to listen to. My experience is real. My perceptions are valid. The life I have lived has made me wise, and that wisdom deserves a seat at the table of every decision I make from here forward. That is not arrogance. That is not selfishness. That is a woman finally, fully coming home to herself. And I want to talk about what that actually looks like in the texture of daily life. Not in the dramatic, crossroads moments, but in the ordinary ones. Because that's where the real practice lies. That's where intuition either becomes a living, breathing part of who you are, or remains a concept you admire from a distance, but never quite inhabit. Think about your relationships. The ones you're in right now. Friendships, family connections, perhaps a partnership. I want you to ask yourself something honest. Are there relationships in your life where you consistently leave the conversation feeling somehow smaller than when you arrived? Where something tightens in you before you even pick up the phone? Where you find yourself editing yourself, softening yourself, making yourself more palatable before you even open your mouth? Your body already knows what that means. You don't need me to interpret it for you. You've known for a while, probably, maybe years, but you've been explaining it away. She means well, he's going through a hard time, it's not that bad, I'm probably being too sensitive. And here's what I want to say about that, with as much gentleness as I can carry. The fact that you've been explaining it away doesn't mean your knowing was wrong. It means you've been protecting something. The relationship, the peace, the version of yourself that doesn't have to deal with what it would mean to act on what you know. But you're at a different place now, aren't you? Something has shifted, even if you can't fully name it yet. Something in you is less willing to keep paying that particular price. And that shift, that quiet, persistent restlessness with the old accommodations, that is your intuition. It's not ingratitude. It's not selfishness. It's the deep intelligence of a woman who has finally decided that her remaining years are too valuable, too irreplaceable, too genuinely hers to spend them shrinking. Listening to your intuition in relationships doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes it means staying differently, speaking more honestly, asking for what you actually need instead of what you think will be easiest to grant, letting people see the full, unedited version of you, and trusting that the relationship's worth keeping will survive it, and the ones that don't survive it were already costing you more than they were giving. That's terrifying and liberating in equal measure, I know. Now let's talk about the quieter, everyday moments, because this is where I think the practice of intuition gets undersold. We tend to talk about it only in the context of big decisions, the job, the relationship, the move across the country. But your intuition is speaking to you constantly in the small moments, in the unremarkable Tuesday afternoons of your life. The book that keeps calling to you from the shelf, even though you can't explain why right now is the right time for it. The route you inexplicably feel like taking on your morning walk that leads you past something you needed to see. The old friend you keep thinking about, for no obvious reason, who turns out to need you when you finally reach out. The creative project you've been dismissing as impractical that keeps quietly, persistently refusing to leave you alone. These aren't coincidences. These are the small, daily language of your intuition. And the more you respond to them, even in tiny ways, even without fully understanding why, the more fluent you become in that language, the more the channel between your deep knowing and your conscious life opens up. It's a practice. Like any real practice, it has days where it feels clear and days where it feels murky. There will be times you follow your gut, and it leads somewhere that confuses you, and you'll wonder if you got it wrong. And sometimes you will have gotten it wrong, not because your intuition failed you, but because you're still learning to distinguish it from other voices that live in the same neighborhood. The anxious voice, the wishful thinking voice, the voice of an old wound that wants to steer everything through the filter of its particular pain. This is not a reason to stop listening. This is the refining process. This is how the knowing becomes more precise over time. Think of it this way. Learning to trust your intuition is less like flipping a switch and more like learning to read the sky. When you first start paying attention to clouds, it all seems a bit uncertain. You're not sure if that's rain coming or just shadow. You make calls that don't pan out. But you keep watching, you keep noticing. And slowly, over time, something in your body starts to recognize the particular quality of light before a storm, the specific heaviness in the air that means something is coming. You develop a relationship with the sky. And then one day you step outside and, with a confidence that feels almost physical, what the day is going to bring. That's the relationship available to you with your own inner knowing. And here's what I want you to hold on to, especially on the days when it feels hard or murky or distant. Every single time in your life that you have listened to yourself, really listened, past the noise and the doubt and the voice that said, "Who do you think you are?" something true happened. Maybe it didn't look the way you expected. Maybe the outcome wasn't what you'd hoped, but there was a rightness to it, a quality of being aligned with something real, of having honored something in yourself that deserved to be honored. That feeling, that's not a small thing. In a life where so much can pull us away from ourselves, the demands, the roles, the relentless business, the grief we carry, the compromises we've made, that feeling of inner alignment is, I would argue, one of the most precious experiences available to a human being. You deserve to live there, not just visit. I want to leave you with this. There is a version of your life, not a fantasy, not an impossible ideal, but a genuinely available, deeply real version where you move through your days in a fundamentally different relationship with yourself, where the sanctuary inside you isn't something you have to fight your way to, it's where you begin, where your first consultation, before you seek any outside opinion or validation, is with the quiet intelligence you've been building your whole life. Where you wake up in the morning and, before the day rushes in, you take just a breath, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and you ask yourself, what do I know today? What am I feeling? What is true right now beneath everything else? And then you listen, not for a dramatic revelation, not for a voice from somewhere outside yourself, just for that still, steady, faithful presence that has been with you through every single chapter of your life, that noticed things you weren't ready to act on, that held truths you weren't yet strong enough to speak, that waited without complaint, without abandoning you, through every season when you were too busy or too afraid or too convinced of your own unworthiness to pay attention. That presence is your intuition. And it is the most intimate, most loyal relationship you will ever have, because it is you. The deepest, wisest, most honest version of you that has been here all along. The unspoken truths you've gathered across a lifetime. They're not a burden to be managed. They're a gift to be lived from. You've earned this knowing. It's time to trust it.